All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions and welcome back to the Sammy Hagar Deep Dive. And it is my pleasure to welcome a new co-host to the show who's never been on. I have been on different channels with him. Can we all have a moment to welcome the Parish of Rock? You've seen him on The Contrarians. You've seen him on Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation, and you've seen him on Grant's Rock Warehouse. And I've had the pleasure of being on shows with the parish, and it's a pleasure to have him on. We're discussing a couple of albums talked about in Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. Thank you very much, sir. And we're in some later day albums now, some relatively later day albums. And this episode, we're going to end off the 90s with the first album credited to Sammy Hagar and the Wabaritas. Came out in early 1999, Red Voodoo. This is a Canadian CD, and I believe what we have here is a Canadian cassette. And as far as I know, this album has never been issued on vinyl. So just got those two formats. But before we get started, I do want to, since this is Parish's first time on the show, I just want to, find out your history. Obviously, we're in different countries on different time zones. So how were you introduced to the music of Sammy Hagar, either in a band or in solo form?
My earliest memory of Sammy Hagar was in Montrose. So my elder brother had the Montrose album. This is my elder brother's Montrose album. So I pinched it off him, still got it to this day, so don't tell him. So that's kind of when I got introduced to him. But whilst I like that album, that wasn't really my first introduction. My first introduction was actually the single "I've Done Everything for You," which came out in the UK, which has got red on the B-side. And I didn't make the connection to start with that this was the same guy from Montrose. And I like that. I like the single. They then came over to play the UK in 1980, or he came over to play the UK in 1980 with the band he had at the time. At that time, I must have spent half my life living at Hammersmith Odeon. It was about an hour on the train from where I lived, and there were so many bands playing. And if Sounds recommended a gig, I went along. Jeff Barton, who's legendary from Sounds, he recommended that people should go and see Sammy Hagar, and I went along, and it's one of the best gigs I ever went to. He was absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's fantastic showman. It was really heavy, and immediately after that, pretty much anyway, from my memory, immediately after that, I went out and bought the live album Loud and Clear, which I think it's called something else over in the States, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called over here in North America. It's called All Night Long, and it's got a different cover, and it doesn't have Space Station number 5 on the end of it. Yeah. But other than that, it's the same album. Great live.
Same album. And I then went backwards from there and got Street Machine, all the albums you've covered on the show so far. What else have I got here? I grabbed a load to look at. Musical Chairs, which is a little weird, but I still like it. And then about that time, out came this album, Danger Zone, which is still to today my favourite Sammy Hagar album. I think it's a fantastic album. And because I liked, back in the day, I used to buy quite a lot of singles. I've got and mainly I bought the singles for the picture sleeves, really. So Turn Up the Music with a nice live shot in the front. This Planet's on Fire and Space Station number 5.
Yeah, I have that one. The rest of them I've never seen before. Those are awesome.
And Heartbeat with Love or Money. It was a double A side. Which as a silhouette, I just think that's a great image of Sammy Hagar as a silhouette, Tim. I mean, that kind of sums him up really with that with that. What's that type of guitar called? Hammerhead or something, isn't it? Is
I
it
believe that's an Explorer.
Explorer? Is it?
That
Yeah.
shape of, yeah,
Well,
it's like the
it's
James
yeah.
Hetfield. It's that
Well, that's
shape.
the guitar he had. That I don't know if that's the exact guitar, but that was the shape of guitar he had when I saw him at Hammersmith Odeon. So I always think of him as with one of those.
And
And
he's
I just
playing,
think
and
as an image.
as a matter of fact, he's playing an Explorer.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, he's got it on the cover. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I got
Yeah,
to
and
ask
he's
you,
and he's got it. He's got it there as well. You can see he's got the same guitar or that type of guitar there. So yeah, so I've got a few singles, a few albums, and I've been a fan ever since. Really, I saw him quite a few times whenever he came. He was quite big in the UK in that he could come over and fill a 3,500, 4,000 seater theatre. He was that, so he was big. His albums didn't do particularly well, but he sold enough. In fact, he lived over here for a while, hence why you get some of the Hypnosis covers and
right.
and photos of him in London,
Yeah.
because he actually lived over here for a while. So he was pretty big. Well, relatively big. He rode on the wave, a bit of the new wave of British heavy metal. I've got a feeling, I haven't double checked it, but I'm fairly certain either in 1980 or 81 he had Def Leppard as his support act when I saw him at Hammersmith Odeon.
That would have been 79, 8. That would have been On Through the Night
yeah.
Def Leppard. Now I got to ask you, and maybe you're getting to this, but I'm all excited. You're talking about going to see him at Hammersmith Odeon. Does this mean that you were at the show that eventually came out as Live 1980?
Yeah.
Because, oh wow, that's awesome. Because that's not the whole show, and I mentioned that in the book. I'd love to hear that entire performance.
Yeah, I've not got a recording, I'm afraid.
Oh,
but I mean, you can go on YouTube and sorry, you can go on and you can, what I've forgotten the name of the website, but you can download the set list, which I'm sure you've done. So so you can see everything he did. But yeah, it's that classic era of Red and Trans Am and all of that kind of what I would call the classic, a mixture of the Montrose stuff and that the late 70s, early 80s stuff. And I love all of that. I mean, that's to me is the Sammy Hagar sound. That big, he's got the big blonde curls, and all of that. I just, and he was definitely the Red Rocker back then. I mean, that was how he dressed. So awesome, and I've loved him ever since. And I've seen him several times solo. I've seen him with Van Halen when he came over. I've seen him with Chickenfoot when he came over. So he doesn't come over here very often, but when he does, I get out there and watch him. So
I'm guessing he comes over there more than he comes to Eastern Canada, which is where I am, because he's pretty much a U.S. only. He might, like, even on the last tour, the Best of All Worlds tour, I think the closest I would have had to drive to either Boston or Toronto, which is not close.
Yeah, well, I was hoping he might bring that over here, but last time I saw him was with Chickenfoot when with the Chickenfoot 3 album, and he played at the Brixton Academy, which is a fairly small club, really. I mean, it's probably 1,000, 1,500 at most. So right down the front with me and my 2 sons. Yeah, loved it. It was really good. But to me, he's just one of the best live performers I've ever seen. I wasn't when he first joined Van Halen. I wasn't convinced. I felt it didn't quite. I was a big Van Halen fan and a big Sammy Hagar fan, so I was really, really up for it. Wasn't sure, and it wasn't until I saw they came over and they supported Bon Jovi in about 92, I think it was 92, 93 at Wembley Stadium.
The Balance tour in 95.
Yeah, it could have been 95. Yeah, Bon Jovi were touring their greatest hits album, Crossroads. So so it was about and they were just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And that kind of is what persuaded me, sort of won me over really to Sammy with Van Halen. And I've loved, I'd already bought the albums because I like them, but I didn't love them, which was the disappointment. But having seen them live, it kind of, I saw them in a new light, and I thought they were really good. And the thing I really liked about them live was they seemed they seemed like they just got up off stage and were jamming, but at the same time were really tight. And the humour and the friendship and the fun that they had. There's not many bands I've ever seen like that on on a big stadium in the way
Yeah.
that they were. So
Or so it seemed,
incredible.
right? So it seemed like
Or so it seemed. Or so it seemed.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because
Behind the scenes, who knows?
yeah, that's this is so interesting to get your perspective on this because um I mean, I heard of Sammy Hagar when Why Can't This Be Love came out in '86. That's, as I write about in the book, that was my introduction.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I had a really hard time finding those old Capitol albums. So it's
Yeah.
really cool to hear your perspective. And I think Danger Zone went to number 12 on the UK charts. Like he did.
Yeah. As I say, it did pretty well.
By way of comparison, he was more successful in the UK at that point than he
Yeah.
was in his home country. He really didn't start selling albums in the States until he signed to Geffen and stayed.
No, it was odd though, because I remember an interview with him around 1980, and they asked him about the fact that he didn't seem to sell many albums and why did Capitol stick with him. And I remember his answer to that was he was selling about 400,000 to 500,000. He do the tour, sell the albums, and that Capitol seemed quite happy with that. That was enough. They made a little bit of a profit on it. He was making a bit of a profit on the touring, and at the time he said there was a lot of acts like that. He quoted REO Speedwagon. This was obviously before they took off with High Infidelity, but he quoted REO Speedwagon, Kansas. And I think Ted Nugent, who and it was all that they were pretty big in the Midwest, so they could sell up to maybe 500,000 in the Midwest. That kept the record company happy, but they didn't want to pump any more money into it because they would have to pump a lot of money into it in order to be able to take him up to 1 million seller or 2 million. So they didn't think it was worth the return on investment. Is what I recall him saying. Which really clearly is what Geffen did. That's what Geffen did, isn't it? They put the money in. So
it's really interesting because I mean, none of his Capitol albums certified, but I would have to think that at the very least, the live albums, Street Machine, and certainly Danger Zone, they would have to be, at least, teetering on that gold status. But you're right, he was a seasonal, or not seasonal, regional performer. Like he could do really well in the South, and he did really well in the Midwest. But East Coast, he said, was always a tough sell for him. I mean, even on the VOA tour, he'd play somewhere one night and sell out a 5,000-seater arena, and then play somewhere the next night in less than half with the same venue. And this is on a platinum album, so his success was very, very much pockets of the U.S. So it's really cool that you were in on that. The fact that you were at the what became the Live 1980 show, that's really cool, because I understand that when Capitol put that out, they didn't put that out until '83, until after he'd signed to Geffen and started to sell in any big quantities. But there's nothing on that Live 1980 pre-Street Machine, because all of that material had already come out on All Night Long / But still, that's a great performance, that Hammersmith Odeon performance. And I would love to see, either Rhino Records or Rock Candy Records or somebody put out the full concert. And, because he had such a great band, they sounded so good. But yeah, so
there is definitely a live version of it, because
they recorded enough songs to put out.
Yeah, but there's a music journalist I listened to on a podcast, a UK music journalist, and he says that there was a particular journalist for Sounds who went to Hammersmith Odeon and would record every single band he saw, and he kept the cassette. So somewhere in a garage somewhere in London, there is probably a rough cassette of that. So,
well, not only that, I mean, like they recorded 8 songs. They would have recorded the whole show.
Yeah,
they only put out those few songs. So anyway, this is great. This is a fantastic discussion, because it's rare for me to meet someone who's was actually actively in to those Capitol albums as they were coming out. And the one time that I saw Sammy was on that Van Halen Balance tour. It's the only time I was ever able to see it. And they certainly didn't look like a band that was at each other's throats at the time. But
No, exactly.
where we're going to go, we're going to skip ahead to 1999 to the Red Voodoo album, as we said. And this album comes on the heels of Marching to Mars, which was Sammy's first post Van Halen album. It's one of my favorites. And I feel like there was a lot of soul searching. There was a lot of angst, a lot of pain in that album. It seems like by the time this album came out 2 years later, he'd kind of exorcised those demons and he was just ready to have a good time. Because this album is this kind of signals a change, I think, in Sammy's recordings. You know, Sammy was never Sammy's material never got what I would call dark. But Marching to Mars, there's some really personal stuff on there. You know, he there's a lot of cool songs on that album. But this album, he's formed a band, the Wabaritas, and it's basically, this album is, you know, the idea is to have a good time. Not every song on here fits that theme, but we'll go through it track by track. But what did you think of this album when you first picked it up, when it first came out?
Well, at the time, I quite liked it. I have to say, I probably haven't listened to it for nearly 20 years. So this it's been quite good over the last week or so to refresh my memory on it. But I quite liked it at the time, and I think the reason I liked it is why I like it now. Actually, it's a rocking album. It's a party album, so it's good fun. I think a lot of the songs sound similar to the 1970s and 1980s Sammy Hagar. So it's certainly the songwriting reminds me of that. I think Victor Johnson on guitar is fantastic. I think he's a really good player. I think the production is good on it as well, and it doesn't sound like it was made in 1999. It's not got anything that would make it, you know, no new metal, alternative metal, or anything like that.
To 1999 rock.
Yeah, so to me, it sounds more like an album he would have put out in the early 80s, probably. So that's the starting point. Although I have to say there's some songs on it I don't particularly like, which we'll come to. But generally, I liked it at the time. I used to play it quite a lot in the car at the time, and I've enjoyed coming back to it.
So there's a reason why I agree with you. There's a reason why, I mean, a lot of the songs have an 80s feel. I mean, two of the guys in the Wabaritas he played with in the 80s. He has Jesse Harms on keyboards and also figuring in on the songwriting, and he's got David Lauser back on the drums. So he's got two members of his, basically the band he had through most of the 80s before Van Halen on this album. So he's got Mona on bass, and then he's got Vic Johnson on guitar. And it's a good sounding, you know, I consider it a solo album because anytime, you know, you got a Sammy Hagar I still consider it a Sammy Hagar album, but as I said this in the book, I really wanted to make this clear. That is no disrespect to the musicians, but other than Jesse Harms, none of them are songwriters really. So it's still Sammy setting the pace for this album.
Yeah, but I think Vic Johnson is a good guitarist, and to me he sounds more like a 70s guitarist. Than the shredders that you got in the 80s. And I think that's part of the reason you get that feel that it's more like an late 70s, early 80s album. Well, although the production doesn't sound like that.
What a challenge for a guy like Vic Johnson, because you go on tour with Sammy Hagar, you're going to have to play some Eddie Van Halen stuff. You're going to have to play Ronnie Montrose stuff. And and you're going to have to make it sound close enough to make it work in front of a live audience. So great musicians, and it's a good sounding album. I agree, it's a really good sounding album. It was self-produced, produced by Sammy and Jesse Harms. You know, and you're absolutely right. There are no drum loops. You know, there's no industrial sounds on here. It's just a really well recorded album.
There's no attempt at rap or anything like that you can imagine Sammy would give a go at. To be honest, that's the sort of thing you think
he tried that. He tried something like that a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think from that point of view, it's good. I hate the album cover though. To be honest,
it's not much of an album cover. Although from Marching to Mars, he has grown his hair back to that classic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The back cover, you know, ruining a lens.
But why they think a cocktail glass is going to sell an album, I've no idea. So
And the CD, inside the jewel case tray, you've got a mix for the Wabarita, which
oh
leads
yeah.
in, which leads into the opening track, which was the first single. And really, the last song that Sammy put out on his own that had any amount of radio play. I actually do remember hearing this on the radio, Mas Tequila. What do you think? What did you think? This was the first thing I heard. I actually did hear it on the radio before buying the album. That's how I knew he had a new album out. Imagine that. That's how it used to work. What do you
Well,
think?
well, it's a mashup of Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Part Two
Yes.
with a Sammy Hagar drinking song.
Yeah.
And as such, it works. I don't like it though, I have to say. I was never a Gary Glitter fan, and I guess with what's happened with Gary Glitter in recent years, I like him even less.
Right.
So that doesn't help the fact I was never particularly a Gary Glitter song fan. But having said that, though, the song works. The way he's meshed it together works. I can see why it would have been played on the radio. It's good fun. It kind of sets the scene for what the album's going to be like. It definitely shows that he's entering a new era with this band. This is going to be a party band. This is going to be tied in to his life on the beach and all of that kind of stuff. So you can see it's a good song to set the scene. I just don't like Rock and Roll Part Two, and therefore I don't particularly like the song.
That didn't occur to me when I first heard it, and it really wasn't until I think I got the CD and read the credits where I went, oh, right. Okay. That's why that sounds a little familiar. It's kind of a shame because you're right. It is tainted for the very reason that you just said. It's too bad they couldn't have changed it just enough so that it would have that.
I mean, to be fair to him, though, I mean, when I first heard it, I mean, I had the album, but I didn't look at the credits when I first put it on the CD player in the car, and I assumed they'd just sampled it. So I was actually pleasantly surprised that they gave Gary Glitter and Mike Leander the songwriting co-credits on it. So they've definitely realised what they've done with it. They haven't just done a sample of the song.
They did the smart thing because wasn't like Led Zeppelin where 20 years after the fact the remasters come out and the credits have changed because they got sued.
Yeah.
So it's an awful lot easier to just we're going to split, but we're going to give them some of the credit on it. Next up, we have the song Shag, which I have to wonder, because this was the late 90s, I have to wonder if this was in any way inspired by the Austin Powers movies.
Well, I got to assume it has a different meaning in America. Because it's over here, the term shag is quite, it's quite a rude term.
Well, that's the context that Mike Myers used in the Austin Powers
exactly movie. And you would assume if over here it would have had a parental guidance sticker purely for this song. I couldn't play this song in the car with my wife and the kids in the car because of I mean, for those who haven't heard it, and it will mean more to any those watching in the UK. But the chorus is, "You make me want to shag you, baby." I mean, it couldn't be more explicit in its intent. If you know what the word shag means, it is a very explicit song. If you don't know what the word means, then I guess, it's just another song, isn't it?
I think it's a really fun, again, it's a party rock song. It's got horns in it. I don't always like it when you have a hard rock song with horns, but I think it fits. I really like this one, actually. You know what, like a song like this could have gotten radio play over here where there's just no way that it would have. But isn't that funny how, it's just an innocuous sounding song.
But he would have, because he lived over here for a few years, he would have known what that word meant. So for me, the song's is kind of as subtle as a brick. But it does rock. It does rock hard. And if I ignore the lyrics, I really like it. I think it's a really good song. It does remind me a bit of Def Leppard's Slam. Now, whether it's just the word, the way the chorus is done, but it does sound a bit like that to me.
Yeah, I hear what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's good. As I say, if the lyrics is what does it for me. But
And
other than that, I think it's a good song.
he sounds great. He's singing
He
fantastic on
does,
this album,
yeah,
you know. Now next up is where the party kind of breaks down for a little bit, and it's one of the stranger songs on the album for me. Sympathy for the Human. Your thoughts about this
yeah.
one?
Well, strange is what I wrote down several times. It's got a strange beginning with that talking intro.
Yeah,
It's the lyrics are very strange. I'm not quite sure whether it's supposed to be back in the days of Adam and Eve, and he's kind of talking in the context of the animals and the insects and everything, or so I'm not quite sure the context of it. It's very different. So you've got these two party songs, and then the album kind of grinds to a halt all of a sudden
absolutely.
with
It's
this
like
song. Exactly, and so therefore I think the sequencing of the album, I don't think I would have put that song in at that point myself. But having said that, I do like it. I think it's a good song. I like the riff. It's again, I think it sounds very 70s. The guitar work on it. And the other bit, I don't know if you picked up on it, but towards the end, it sounds to me a bit as if they're playing a homage to Sympathy for the Devil with a
yes,
bit of the instrumental. So clearly that's where the inspiration of the title came
oh
from.
yeah, yeah,
And they've put it into my view, they put it into that closing bit towards the end of the end of the song.
yeah. Lyrically, this song reminds me a little bit of the Van Halen song "Mine All Mine" from OU812. It's like sort of a was from a religious point of view, or
Yeah,
sort of like that. But it this song sounds like it would have fit better on Marching to Mars than this album.
yeah. But
But
it's not religious though, is it? He's not singling out any particular
no, it's
religion.
all over the
It, it
place.
it's all over the place. So that's what I'm saying. It's really odd, the lyrics. And I'm not particularly a lyrics person, but I have to say I had to go back and read the lyrics when I was listening to it over the last week because it kind of drew me into the song. So as a song, I rather like it. I just don't think I would have had it at that point. It's kind of stopped the album in its tracks in my view.
I think it would have fit either on the album before it or the one after it, but not on this album.
Yeah,
But
or
just like
maybe
that,
put it at the start of side two, where you're flipping it over. You've already broken the album up
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So from that point of view, it might not have sounded quite so out of place.
But now for some musical whiplash, we get the title song, which is this upbeat, countryish, Cajun sort of hoedown. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything that we've heard so far on the album, and it really doesn't sound like anything we've heard from Sammy to this point. This song
Well,
really points the way forward for albums like Living It Up and Sammy Hagar and Friends.
yeah, but I mean, to me, it sounds quite Bob Segerish, with the
Yeah,
guitar and the vocals and the backing vocals. And I think it's just the one that's also got the horns on. So
yeah,
it sounds quite Bob Seger. And what's interesting is I heard Martin Popoff speak on one of his History in Five Songs podcast.
hmm
And he put Sammy Hagar into that Midwest rock with Bob Seger and a few others. And I thought, no, that's not where Sammy Hagar
not
sits. To me,
really.
Sammy Hagar doesn't sit in that at all. But
No,
having heard
maybe
this,
maybe a song here or there, but not overall.
well,
No,
but this song definitely would sit in that
yes, yeah.
Midwest.
If he put an album out of songs like this, then
Yeah.
absolutely, he's right there with the
So,
Mellencamp and the
so from
Springsteen.
that point of view, maybe as is always the case, maybe Martin's right and I'm wrong. Maybe there is more to it than that.
Yeah,
The other thing about it that I quite like is I think the music. So I think it's an average song, to be honest. I don't think it's anything special, but I do like the musical break in the middle. I think that's quite good. I like the way that goes. And the other thing I find odd, I'm convinced he's singing Red Rooster, not Red Voodoo, all the way through the song. I can't hear him singing Red Voodoo. I
well,
can
that's an old.
only hear him
There's an old
singing
blues
Red
song,
Rooster.
right?
Yeah. So I had to again check the lyrics to make sure he's not singing Red Rooster, which he's not. But that's what it sounds like to me he's singing. So
It's
But
fun.
yeah, I mean, it's okay as a song, but
Yeah,
nothing
it's
special.
fun. It's just not to me, and to me, and this is just my opinion, and I try to stress this in the book as a big fan. It's leaning more and more into that beachside, hey, kick back, and it's not the hard rock that I'd like to hear from him.
Yeah,
The song is fun. And it's like, oh, okay, that's different. But again, now we're back to sort of a contemplative, slower song with "Lay Your Hand on Me," not hands, plural, just hand.
yeah.
And
Not to be confused with Bon Jovi.
yeah, but this one, I don't even know what do you think of this one? I'm not even sure what to think.
Well, I think again, I think it sounds quite 70s. It's got a kind of a Led Zeppelin guitar feel to it to me. That kind of, it's not quite Stairway to Heaven, but it's got that kind of guitar at the beginning for me. I like the way the guitar builds. I think the drums when the heavy guitar and the drums kicks in, I really like that. I think that's good. And so it builds really nicely with that sort of the second half where it rocks, I think is really good. So yeah, it's one of the songs that makes me think it's a 70s album. It's got that feel to it for me. There's lots of Sammy's oh yeahs and oohs and all the kind of noises he normally makes, which I haven't heard on this album up until this bit. So he's definitely having fun with it, is what it sounds like. And then it slows down again at the end. So it's one of my favourite songs on the album, I have to say. I quite like, yeah, I like it. I think it's good.
That's interesting. See, it's not one of my favorites, but one of the reasons is I think it's fine musically, but lyrically, it's a bit sparse. There aren't a lot of lyrics. A lot
No,
is
there's not.
very repetitious. And I think that it could have used a little bit more work there. But you're right, it is like a minor epic. But all I can think of is like, word for word, there aren't a lot of different words in this song. It's
No, but I think
extremely repetitive.
the change in tempo
Yeah,
saves that for me. If they hadn't gone up and sort of speeded the song up, and the way that I think the drumming on it's really good when it
is. Yeah,
speeds up,
sure.
and I think that saves the song for me. If they hadn't done that, I agree, it would have been quite monotonous. But that change in direction, I like. I think it's good.
So finally, the cassette anyway, because we don't have a vinyl version to look at, but side one ends with "High and Dry Again." Now, to me, this is the most classic sounding Sammy Hagar song. I could hear this on one of his Geffen albums, and therefore I like it. Now, maybe I like it because it's, dare I say, safe, but I just think it's a good song. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, I've written down pardon me, very 70s, 80s Sammy Hagar. Um, it's when it starts, it sounds quite. It sounds a bit like AC/DC to me, the way it starts and the
It
guitars
sounds
come
like
in.
Dirty Deeds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I like it a lot. I think Vic's guitar work is really good. Again, the change in tempo on the song works for me as well. Makes the song a little bit more imaginative. And again, one of my favourite songs on the album.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Side two, in my opinion, side two just continues that sort of back and forth between your standard sort of expected Sammy Hagar song and then kind of head scratching songs. And one of the head scratchers for me is the revival. Myself, I don't particularly care for this song. It's too repetitive. There's nothing to it, but that's just my opinion. What do you think of this one?
Um, I quite like it. Bearing in mind this is 1999, I think it sounds like a chicken foot rejection. It's kind of got a feel to it which feels a bit like, so you can almost see 10 years earlier that sound was beginning to develop to me anyway in the songwriting. So and I really like Chicken Foot. So from that point of view, the song, even if I think it's a reject from a Chicken Foot album, I still quite like it. I think the guitar works good. It's definitely another party song, so it kind of fits in well with the album. So yeah, it's okay. I don't mind it. It's probably I suppose you'd say it was filler, but it's not bad. I think it's not too bad.
Cool. That's cool. So next up we have a cover. I believe this is a Wilson Pickett song. I think I'm right about that. Don't Fight It, Feel It. Now, this is a sort of an R&B type of thing, and normally it would be the type of song that, yeah, it is a Wilson Pickett song that I wouldn't care for, but I actually really like this one, and I like the way that Sammy sings it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it suits his voice really well. I don't know the original, so I can't compare it, but I think it's a good cover. As I say, suits his voice. It's quite bluesy. Again, it sounds like a bit like Bob Seger musically, so it's similar to that earlier song. But certainly you could see why they chose it and put it on the album. It's not one of it's not one of these where you wonder why they've covered that particular song. So I don't know if it's a particular favourite of his or what, but yeah, he definitely does a good rendition of it, I think.
And it fits the party theme of the album. That leans in that category.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
another song that has definite 80s roots is The Love, but this song actually goes back some 15 years, because this was recorded for the HSAS album Through the Fire.
Oh, right, okay.
So this was co-written with Neil Schon, and this was originally, I believe, so the Through the Fire album, there's like 9 songs on that album, but there's at least 6 songs that they did live that didn't make the album. And this was one of them. I believe the lyrics were different. It was called Through the Eyes of Love, but it's the same music. And I didn't read. I think I'm like you. The first time I heard this, I bought it and I put it right in my car CD player. And so it wasn't until later that I looked at the credits. But I remember thinking, this sounds like an older song to me, even before I knew it.
Yeah. Well, it does exactly. I mean, it's interesting. I knew it by Neil Schon. I didn't know it had been recorded or written, and they played it live back then. I really like this. I like the chugging guitar on it. I think it should have been a single. I think in 1999 it probably wouldn't have done much, but to me it's got that. It sounds like it's a good pop rock song, which I think would have.
It's commercial. It's
so. I can imagine Van Halen doing it as well on one of the albums. So I think it's pretty good. Yeah, I like it.
So next we have maybe the heaviest song on the album, Right on Right. This is just, to me, this is like High and Dry Again. This is just a good, reliable, hard rocking Hagar song.
Yeah, when it kicks off, you think it's a live track, don't you? The way it starts, with the crowd and everything. Heavy. Probably, as you say, probably the heaviest on the album. Starts slow, and then the band kick in, and it lifts up, which is done on a few of the songs of the album, which works. I think as a song, it's not the best of Sammy Hagar. I mean, it's a typical Sammy Hagar type song, I think. So I wouldn't say it's a classic, but on this album, it's one of the better albums, one of the better songs, I would say.
Yeah, it almost feels like if they had a chart and saying, "Okay, we need a heavier one here." All right,
yeah,
let me come up with something. But I do like it. The lyrics don't make a lot of sense to me, but I just kind of groove along with it. And then we close off with another slow one. I think this is the best ballad on the album of the slower songs. I think it might have held together better with a different title, but Returning of the Wish. It's kind of an awkward title, but they could have called it This Could Be Love or Could This Be Love, because that's what they say in the song. And this also, I think, conceivably, this could have ended up on a Van Halen album. And you never know.
Absolutely.
You never know which of these song ideas in their earliest form Sammy may have presented to Eddie.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound like a Van Halen ballad. I think it's odd they finished with this song. I think they should have flipped this and right over. I think Right and Right should have been the last song on the album. I always think albums should finish with a bit of a fanfare, and I think this is a bit of an odd choice. The other thing I found a bit odd is you knew it was going to kick in and build up with a solo. I was expecting it at about 2 minutes, and for the next 2 minutes after that, I'm sitting there waiting for the guitar to kick in, and it doesn't kick in until about 4 minutes. That's sort of where it ramps up. So I think it's a bit long from that point of view. But nonetheless, it's decent. It's a good song, as you say. Probably one of the best ballads on the album. Definitely could have been a Van Halen ballad. But I would have put it second to last. I wouldn't have put it last on the album.
You know, I don't know, but I agree with you. It does kind of take too long for too little a payoff, musically.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at this as a side one and a side two, there's 6 songs on side one and 5 songs on side two. So maybe they were trying to stretch it out to.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true. And
to
they
be
chucked on a
playing.
cover version as well, didn't they? So to help stretch. And I suppose it's the era of the CD. Although it's not a particularly long album, is it? I mean,
No, it's
for a
not.
CD album, it's not particularly long.
When I think about it, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think Sammy has ever really fallen prey to that. Let's fill every space, every available space of music on here. I think he just says, I've got this many songs and here we go.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's a good thing because long albums are fatiguing.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter how good the songs might be. So, this was the second and last album that Sammy did for MCA. After that was sort of a difficult period, not just for Sammy, but for a lot of classic, I guess the term came heritage acts, where it was more and more difficult for them to land on a major label or stay on a label for very long. So after this, he started kind of bouncing back and forth between these many minor independent labels, although his last couple have been, through BMG. But this album hit the top 20, I want to say, on Billboard, or the top 30. It didn't certify. I don't know how. I have to wonder. I have to think that Marching to Mars must have been close to gold, being his first post Van Halen album, and this was the one that came right behind it. Mas Tequila got some airplay. So this is probably in the 350,000 sales range, but I think it's a decent album. I think that for the most part, it's a rock album. And again, Sammy still sounds fantastic on this. And it's worth checking out. And it's been interesting to revisit these because, I kind of did buy it, listen to it a couple of times, and then file it. So it has been good because obviously, if I'm going to do a book on this catalog, I've got to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So I had to revisit all of these albums. And there were songs on here that I kind of forgot about. And there were songs in there I forgot that I actually really liked.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as good as Marching to Mars. And I don't think it's as good as 1013, but I think it's okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
So, folks, what do you guys think of Red Voodoo? Are we on to something? Are we way off? I mean, we disagree on a few tracks, but that's great. It's good to have this discussion. I want to thank Perisher Brock for sitting in with me. Don't forget, watch for him on all of the channels we talked about. Once again, I'll have the link posted to Red on Black, the bottom. That's all part of this deep dive. And we'll see you next time on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thanks. Cheers.